Photographers love talking about camera gear, such as lenses, camera bodies, tools, and accessories. So as a new photographer, it can be confusing to know which photography tools are must-haves and what you can leave on the shelf. So in today's episode, I'm talking about the 4 photography tools that I consider to be must-haves because they will help you get better photos, save you time, and make your life easier. Plus, you'll go on to use them for the rest of your photography life. So let's go ahead and dive in. Hey there, I'm Audrey-Anne, founder of Live Snap Love, and I'm on a mission to help photographers just like you grow their photography skills quickly and in a way that feels simple and easy so you can shorten the learning curve and get photos you love faster. I created this Photography Made Simple podcast to share simple, actionable techniques, helpful insights, and practical advice on all things photography. So if you're itching to take your photos to the next level, whatever that level may be, you're in the perfect place. So let's get started. So the tools you use in photography are so very important because they can help you learn the important elements of photography, make getting great photographs easier, and ultimately improve the quality of your photos. Now, with each tool that I'm going to share, we're going to talk about who it's for, when to know you're ready to use it, and the major benefits of using this tool for your photography. Now, all of these are ones that you will use for the rest of your photography life, so they're also great investments. Now, I've also created a freebie for you that goes along with this episode, and it has all the information, links, and suggestions for each of these tools. You'll find it at livesnaplove.com/tools-guide, or you'll find a link to it at the show notes for this episode at livesnaplove.com/10. Now, I don't want to make you wait any longer, so let's get into the 4 must-have tools for photography. I think you're going to love it. So the first must-have tool is a white balance tool. Now, a white balance tool is something that you use in order to set your white balance in camera. Now, you get multiple options for these, but they all do the same thing. They tell your camera what neutral looks like, so that the overall color tones of your image are correct. Now, why this is so helpful and therefore will make your life easier is because you take away any guesswork as to what the correct white balance is. No more wondering if your image is too yellow or is it too green or too blue, because you've set the white balance perfectly in camera. Now, you can use this for any type of photography where it's important to get the color balance right. So I would consider that a must for portrait photography because you really want your skin tones to be accurate, and also things like product photography and maybe street photography too. Where it might not be so important is for landscape photography, when you might want to tweak the tones so that they're not accurate. But I personally always like to start off with an accurate white balance, and then I can get a little bit more creative in post-production. So a white balance tool is particularly useful if you are just starting out in photography, because one of the things that it will help you do is teach you to see color correctly. Something that all of us are usually pretty bad at when we first start out in photography. It's really common for new photographers to think that an image that has the correct white balance is too warm when actually it's correct. So a lot of the time, if you're just starting out, and I definitely went through this as well, is your images are far too cool. So having a white balance tool really helps you see what that correct color looks like. Because until you can see that, it's really difficult to set it in post-production or to use Kelvin or some other type of way of setting your white balance. Now, once you can eyeball an image and see where the white balance should be, then you can get away with using a white balance tool if you wish. but they are still a huge time saver, as you don't then need to guess at the white balance and make sure you get it right in processing. And as you only need to do it once at the start of each session, whether that be for a paying client or whether that's simply photographing your child painting at the table or whatever it might be, you only need to do that once, and unless the light changes, the white balance will remain the same and you can carry on shooting knowing that your white balance is correct. If you use something like auto white balance, then the white balance can change between each image, which can make editing your photos a pain. Now, you do get different types of white balance tools. You get a white balance lens cap, you can use an expo disc or something similar, or you can use a grey card. Remember, you'll find links and suggestions for each of these in that tools guide. You'll find that at the show notes for this episode at livesnaplove.com/10, or I'll also link to it around where you're listening to this episode. Moving on now to our must-have photography tool number 2, and that is a fast write speed memory card. Have you ever taken a series of images and then not been able to press the shutter to take any more images for a minute or two? Now, that's called buffering, and it's due to your camera needing to catch up with writing the images from the sensor onto your memory card. Now, just to rewind a bit here in case that's confusing, when you press the shutter to take the image is pressed onto the camera sensor. The camera sensor then takes that image and then writes the data for it onto a memory card so that you can then download it and view it on your computer. Now, of course, it does take a little time to write that data over, but one thing that can impact how fast your camera can write the information onto your memory card is the memory card's write speed. So cheaper memory cards may look like a bargain, but they tend to have slower write speeds, which means if you're taking a lot of images in quick succession, maybe you're using something like burst mode on your camera simply can't write the data onto the card fast enough to keep up with you pressing the shutter. Getting a memory card with a fast write speed is definitely a bit more expensive, but it's worthwhile, especially if you take a lot of action shots, whether that be racing cards or sports or just your crazed toddler running around in the back garden, anywhere where you are likely to take a lot of images in quick succession. However, if you predominantly shoot still lifes or landscapes, this definitely won't be such an important tool for you. So I do spend a bit more money on my cards because I do want them to have that fast write speed, because I do like to be prepared for any eventuality. I do take a lot of different types of photos. Some of them are still life, some of them are macro, some of them are portraits where my subjects aren't moving around terribly quickly. But even sometimes when photographing portraits, I find that there's an expression and I'll snap my shutter because I've got, seconds to try and get that perfect moment. And I also do a lot of lifestyle photography where we've got a lot of action, family photos when we're on holiday, again, a lot of action, a lot of sports. So I definitely like to have that faster write speed so that I know, regardless of what types of image I take and how fast I want to take them, my camera is going to be able to keep up with me. Okay, moving on now. So we've spoken about a white balance tool and a fast write speed memory card. The next tool that I consider to be a must-have is some editing software. So when you first start out in photography, I know that you want to do everything as cheaply as possible. And you don't want to spend a lot of money on editing software. And I really get that. Honestly, I do. But a very worthwhile investment is the photography plan from Adobe at $10 a month. Now for that, you get 3 amazing programs. You get Lightroom Classic, Photoshop, and Lightroom CC. Now the one I'm most interested in talking about for this episode is Lightroom Classic, because it's actually the workhorse of all 3. Although to be honest, I'd hate to be without Photoshop too. But Lightroom Classic is an end-to-end photo management application that allows you to do everything you need in one single place. Now, I know that doesn't sound particularly sexy, but you will use it to upload, organize, manage, edit, and share your photo books. And by using one tool to do everything from tagging your photos so you can find them again, to editing them, to creating photo books, you will save yourself so much time and mental bandwidth. And of course, it is one, if not the best raw file editor on the market. It is seriously such a huge time saver that I simply cannot recommend it more highly. For me, one of the things that you can never get more of is time. So I guard my time more ferociously than I guard anything else. Now, I know that if you are just starting out in photography, you might not feel that this is something for you yet, that you're not ready for it yet. But one of my biggest regrets was actually not starting immediately with Lightroom and trying to use other tools to do the job more cheaply. It actually cost me way more in the long run because I ended up moving over to Lightroom and Photoshop anyway. But most importantly, it lost me probably literally months of time. Get a system in place for organizing, managing, and editing your photos at the very start of your journey, if you can, and I promise you will thank me in the long run. Or maybe you won't, because you'll never know the hell of trying to organize 4 years worth of photos that are in different places on your hard drive, where you've got numerous copies of each photo and where you've overwritten many of them. Now, you also get Photoshop with the photography plan, which is just an amazing program that will allow you to get really creative with your images. And if you need it, Lightroom CC 2, so you can sync some of your photos to the cloud for remote working. If you want to, I personally don't use it. Now, the photography plan is a subscription model, which means you pay $10 a month and then you continue to have access to it. The one you want is a photography plan. There is more options available, and I'm going to link to an article that I wrote that explains the differences between the three. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes. Now, I know that there are people who don't want a software subscription just on principle, and maybe that's you. But honestly, the photography plan is incredible value. So if that is you, I would urge you to reconsider. If you've been a photographer for a while, you might remember the huge cost for Photoshop. Back in 2015, which was when I last purchased it, it was $699. And if it was still available now, you can bet your bottom dollar that the price would have gone up. And the cost for Lightroom Classic that same year was, I believe, $199. Lightroom CC wasn't a thing back then. But that means with the subscription plan, you're getting at least $900 worth of editing software for just $9.99 a month. Now, that means you'll have covered the price of the software after nearly 8 years. Also, remember, one-off licenses are never really one-off, as you will always end up upgrading to future versions. So generally, you end up buying the latest versions every 2 to 3 years on average. True, it's never the full cost again, as you get a special upgrade price, but you're still forking out every couple of years. And another good thing with a subscription model is you get all the updates immediately. So you always have the latest version, meaning you get all the new features and tools the second they are released, and everything is wrapped up in that monthly price. Now, I know that sounds like I'm trying to convince you, and it's just because I do believe it's the best option out there. It allows you to get started for, the price of a couple of Starbucks per month, and it is something that you'll possibly or probably end up upgrading to later. However, I do understand if, first of all, you don't want to invest in editing software just yet, in which case you can actually use the free editing software that you get from Canon and Nikon. Both will allow you to edit your raw files, so you can absolutely start with that until you feel ready to start taking your photos to the next level. And if you really don't want a subscription model, then you do get other editing software that you can purchase for a one-off fee, and then you'll just need to upgrade and pay for that upgrade every 2 to 3 years. And if you're thinking that you don't think you need to edit your photos at all, then I would encourage you to listen to episode number 9, where we talk about the importance of editing your photos and how it can really help take your photos to the next level. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes, or you can just scroll back from where you're watching this and find episode 9. So let's move on to the final tool that I recommend, and that is getting yourself what is known as a fast lens or fast glass. Now that sounds pretty impressive, but really it just refers to a lens that has a wide maximum aperture. So rewinding a little bit for any new photographers, the aperture is the hole in your camera lens that allows light to pass through to your sensor. The bigger the hole, the more light gets in. So a wide aperture, such as f1.4, in other words, a wide hole, will allow you to let more light in than an aperture of f5.6. Now, the kit lens that came with your camera probably has a variable aperture, meaning that the maximum size of the aperture changes depending on whether you are zoomed in or zoomed out. And the maximum apertures tend not to be very wide either, usually around f3.6. And given that many lenses simply aren't sharp when you use them all the way open, you can often find yourself needing to shoot at around f5.6 for sharpness. And that doesn't let a whole lot of light into your camera via your aperture, which means you need to increase your ISO number, which can lead to more noise, or you have to slow down your shutter speed and risk introducing motion blur. So what a fast lens allows you to do is open up your aperture more so you can use a lower ISO and or use a faster shutter speed, hence the term fast glass. So basically, a fast lens will give you more options and leeway with your settings, especially if you shoot indoors and your subjects move around a lot. Now you can pick up a fast lens relatively cheaply, usually for around $125, but I would also consider buying a second-hand version of these lenses. Many people buy these as their first lens after the kit lens, but then go on to upgrade them to a higher spec lens. So you will find you can get some very lightly used lenses that are more cost effective, especially since you might go on and upgrade them at a later date too. Now, again, I do understand that you may not have the funds to upgrade from your kit lens right now, and that's absolutely fine. It's definitely something you can do in the future. You don't have to get everything all right at the beginning. And it doesn't mean that you can't get great photos. You absolutely can, even with your kit lens. You may have some limitations that you need to work around, but that's half the fun in photography. You'll also want to listen to the podcast episode we recently recorded on how to make the most of your kit lens. Again, I'll link to that in the show notes. So we have a white balance tool, a fast write speed memory card, the photography plan from Adobe, and a fast lens are all tools that I think can improve your photos and generally make your photography life easier right from the get-go. Don't forget that I have that free tools guide, which has links to everything I've mentioned here today and some different options for you. You can find that at the show notes for this episode at livesnaplove.com/10, and I'll also link to it around where you're listening to this. One more thing, we are 10 episodes into the Photography Made Simple podcast, and I really hope you've been enjoying it so far. I know I'm still getting my feet wet and I have some things to learn, but I really hope that you've seen the value in the episodes that we've been creating so far. And I have a sneaking feeling that some of the episodes I've got coming up are exactly what you need right now to keep you motivated and moving forward in photography. So do make sure that you hit that subscribe button for the podcast wherever you listen to it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever. No matter where you listen, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. So that's it for this week, and I cannot wait to see you here, same time, same place next week. Talk to you soon. So that wraps up this week's episode of Photography Made Simple. I'll be back at the same time, same place next week. But if you want more, head on over to livesnaplove.com/podcast, where you can find all the resources and the downloads mentioned, plus a whole lot more. Finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, please be sure to subscribe, and that way you won't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you again next week.